Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristin Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hi, Kristin. Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator.
Thanks, Sam.
I'm excited about today's episode. We're going to talk a little bit about current events, what's going on in the world, and how we can pull some of those reflections and learnings into our own events.
Great.
And our event plans. We have some exciting news, though. We're officially launched in season 2, and we have a new partner that has joined us. Greater Giving has come on to join us in partnership of the Fundraising Elevator podcast. We're so excited to have them on the team and to welcome them to the show. So Greater Giving, thank you for joining us in this endeavor. And we're on episode 48, nearing that episode 50, and we thought that this would be a good time to talk a little bit about how the world is changing, evolving, things that we're seeing that we can then start to bring into our own fundraising and specifically our own fundraising events.
I think I can hear it now. The I just figured out how to do it. That while we're using the word evolution, there are some bedrock things that will carry through. So this is just a chance for us to take a look at those in new scenarios and how we can continue to level up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was in conversation with Jordan Patrick of Bite Size Books, in which he had a conversation with me on a LinkedIn Live that we'll be sure to share out about our own book, Planning a Successful Major Donor Event. And there's some great sort of tools that I want to pull forward as we do kind of a compare and contrast today about what we're seeing in big events that are taking big public stages right now and how we could adopt some of those into our own thinking about our own events. So I think out of the pandemic, there was sort of this slow progression back into gathering. And then I have seen some really tremendous gatherings that have been really moving to witness. They're on big public stages. People are participating in giant numbers. One of my favorites to talk about is the Eras Tour. And if there's Swifties out there, I think we can all turn our own missions into the Eras Tour and create some big fans, some big Swifties out there.
And we're going to deep dive on the Eras Tour specifically because I know you've sort of spent some time thinking about what is that? Is that sort of galvanizing point? What is happening? I want to sort of pull back just slightly from there before we dive into the specifics because I think what the Eras Tour points to and what a lot of the other things we want to point to today is movement building.
Movement building, yeah.
And for us, in taking a look at your event as only a fundraising event, as only one moment of time, one point of connection with a donor, you're missing the larger opportunity to create a movement for your mission. What happens when 300 people, 200 people, 50 people in a room are in alignment with your mission, are fired up and ready to go do work? What can that do? And so you were just speaking at the One Cause Raise conference in Nashville, and you were on a storied stage at the Country Music Hall of Fame.
I was.
Where folks such as Dolly Parton have been. No pressure.
Could you imagine?
No, but I think that also is a frame for spaces having stories and what that is. So on that stage, you were talking about movement building and how events can do that. What are some ideas that you want to pull forward here for folks who weren't able to attend that you talked about?
Well, there's a couple of big things that we're seeing in the media right now. And I want to pull those forward first and name them so we can keep referring to them as examples. So the Eras Tour is definitely one element that we're seeing this huge groundswell of support that really has become a movement around probably the biggest, wealthiest musician creating a fan base that is actually a bigger cultivation of belonging, right?
Yep.
Then we also have, with the recent political shifts as we're nearing election time, for those who tuned into the DNC, there was this broadcast event that was a hybrid event.
Right.
And as a hybrid event, it was doing two things. It was pulling closer those key constituents that are elected officials in our own communities that are our delegates in our own communities, to give them an experience of being a part of something. And then it was story sharing out to an audience that was tuning in and participating via TV viewing or media clips afterwards. Right. And then there is this outcropping from the same political election of virtual gatherings that are happening, to see this movement building of different groups that identify based on, their occupation, their own racial identity, their gender identity, gathering in virtual settings. Oprah hosted a large gathering, but then there's been more specific gatherings like White Dudes for Harris, and Out for Harris of the LGBTQ community. And these virtual gatherings, I think, have also brought to the table this idea of how do we reach across the divide using technology and tools that are helping us to still gather, even though we're not in the same space together. And then finally, our own conference, the Elevate conference, I think is also an example where we're pulling in a specific demographic, right? We're very specific to this being a conference that is designed for a very particular group. The fundraising event planners at the nonprofit that touch the event, the committee members, the volunteers, the board members who touch the event. And in that, we are curating and customizing our content to be relevant. So we have 4 great examples that we can pull in, and there's a couple of themes across all of them that I want to be able to highlight, because I think we need to take some time in looking at how our own events reflect these elements. The sense of belonging. There's probably nothing more powerful than feeling like you're a part of something. Because when people feel a sense of belonging, they feel this identity alignment, they have a shared language, they have a shared mission, and they're out working on that mission even when the mission isn't asking them to, right? That shared sense of belonging is a sort of identifier where individuals say, I'm such a part and value aligned with this work that I'm going to go do this work on my own time.
And that's a movement.
Yeah. It's a movement.
When folks are working for your mission, perhaps even unbeknownst to you, because it is a part of their identity, that's a movement.
That's a movement. And the movement element is something that's interesting, because what that does is start to create energy toward your mission without impact on your team.
Wait, say that again, please.
It creates movement and energy toward your mission without staff impact. Yeah. So one of the best ways to prevent, or one of the best cures for burnout, is connection.
Yeah.
And that is because it fills our own cups. It gives us a sense of sort of excitement and fuels our energy around a movement. But then it also pulls together a whole army fighting for the same thing. And the galvanizing moment that happens is almost always in gathering.
Yeah.
We can talk at people a lot. We can broadcast content out a lot. But the thing that galvanizes the difference between a mission and a movement is often the gathering. And every social justice movement, every religion is rooted in gathering, because it moves the impact so much further. And this sense of belonging, this shared language, these shared beliefs creates this energy that is beyond what you as the individual in the work can do.
Well, and I want to pull the thread through that you dropped there, because it was casual, but it's huge. And it's that movements can, and in fact should, include everyone at the organization. I think often our fearless fundraising superheroes out there drop into a place of like, what am I doing for them? What am I doing for the donors at this event? How do I want the donors to feel? What do I want them to go do, if they're doing that at all? Versus like, I've got to raise. So if they get out of the fundraising part and actually start thinking about the audience, often it's a one way.
Right.
It could be, what do I want us to feel? What do I want us to do? I mean, when that room feels good, when we talk to our clients afterwards, they are reinvigorated about their mission.
Right.
They see themselves as a part of the group supporting the mission and going out into the world.
Yes. Well, and I think that there is this need. When we feel that level of investment, we want a way that we can participate, right? And Paul Zach's research has often come back to the fact that when there is a call to action at the height of the energy, it creates a sense of satisfaction for an audience. And I think sometimes we fear asking, right? For our own missions, we fear asking. We hope people will give because it's the right thing to do. But if people are uncertain how, it actually is scary to do because you're not sure when or how this is supposed to happen. And if we're not leveraging that energy and that momentum, it sometimes can have the opposite effect where it feels like it's secondary or it's less important. So think about, let's dive into a Taylor Swift concert. If you've ever seen social media of a Taylor Swift concert, there are fan followers that know what the next song is. They have costumes for every look, every era. They know every lyric. They have created a culture of connection to each other through exchanging friendship bracelets. And when Taylor Swift hits the stage and sings a fan favorite, the crowd is 100% invested in with her. They know the lyrics. They created a culture of action that happens in some of these, like when there's a moment or a beat in a song that generates a spark of response, like a call and response. Where We Goin' is a call and response that then her next lyric answers, or the proposal phenomenon that's happening at her concerts. All of that connection and energy, if she were to take an action in that moment and say, I now want to make sure that we're funding cats. She's a big cat fan. Please get out your phone, scan this QR code, and make a donation. She would be raising millions of dollars for cats, right? That when you have that sense of connection and belonging and investment, you have that desire and interest in giving. So this relates back to our own events. I think that if we are fearful of that ask, then it sets it aside and it doesn't necessarily happen. And yet, if we do that ask at the height of the energy, if we've created a sense of belonging, if we've created a sense of connection, if we've built that energy and momentum, and now we make that emotional ask for support, there is a return. One, we release oxytocin and cortisol in the bloodstream, and it feels good to give. I mean, I can't think of a single time I've made a gift and been like, wow, that felt awful. You know, like it feels
because
good.
If it feels awful, you don't give.
Right.
I'm the ultimate penalizer around that.
Oh, absolutely.
In a moment, you cannot compel me to give if it's not teed up.
And yet you're the ultimate giver if it feels good.
You bet.
Yeah. I've been shocked to see you throw that bid paddle in the air at levels in the past where I've been like, oh.
Shocked not only because it was working on me, but shocked because of the implications for our checking account.
Yes,
but
it's true.
People do more than they think they can do.
Yes.
When they feel like they are making a difference.
And if you don't make that ask, if you don't center that as a big part of your program, what you do is leave your audience dissatisfied because they don't have that way to participate. They don't, unless you have lyrics to a song that everyone knows and can sing along to, which is a tool to implement. But unless you have that sense of, I'm going to give you a call to action and you're going to respond, that leaves a sense of dissatisfaction. So as we're spending hours and hours and hours planning our fundraising event, I think that it's important for us to think about how are we confidently at the right height of energy and momentum, giving people an easy way to participate. Now, let's say, for example, the event's not a fundraising event. Let's say we're at a rally and the goal is that we are trying to build a movement around a legislative agenda. There has to be a call to action that we're not just informing our audience, but we're actually giving them a place where they can go put their energy.
Yeah.
So there has to be a clear call to action that says, here's what you're going to do right now. You're going to get out your phone. You're going to scan this QR code and you're going to register to volunteer, or you're going to endorse. You're going to pledge an endorsement.
Yep.
There has to be call to action where folks feel a sense of satisfaction that their time yielded an impact on the mission, because we're all supporting and attending these events because we believe in the mission. So if I've come and I've spent all my time and I leave there and I haven't really got more connected to the mission, and I also haven't been asked to support in any way, I'm going to leave pretty dissatisfied.
Yep.
And I've had those experiences at events.
Well, and I think it's remembering in crowd dynamics that energy is not created nor destroyed. It gets
Reallocated
and reallocated in different ways, right? And so if I come into an event with energy that I'm willing to give to you, and you don't do what needs be done to get that energy from me, I'm going to go spend that energy somewhere else. It doesn't mean I'm going to walk out the door and give $100 to another organization doing similar work, but it means I'm going to reinvest that time in me or this or that. Like, that energy is yours to have. And what I hear that I want to pull through for people is that you need to not wing your program.
Right.
There needs to be a plan for your program.
Yeah.
But also, the plan for your program should not be the obligatory, we have to have this board member, this sponsor, this, and this on stage, unless they are speaking to me in the audience. I think there is a cohesion that has to happen to make that all work.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to get into storytelling because I think that that's the tool, right? That's the tool that we have in our toolkit. But reflecting back on some of these big events we've seen lately, it pulls me into this idea of a couple of key elements that we have to think about in our planning. Belonging is a big one, right? The DNC had a couple of behaviors that were really powerful, impactful, that I wanted to call forth, because it not only created a sense of belonging, it also created a sense of connection.
Yep.
So they used a couple of sort of, I would say, like best practices in being a good speaker. So all of their speeches were very specifically crafted, but together, if you watch the entire 4-day event, all of the speeches created a single narrative.
Yeah.
They all wove together.
Yeah.
So you had really great content that individually you could tap into and be moved by, but you also had the entire event create a single narrative. Yep. And that single narrative was for us to understand this candidate, right? That overall we learned all about history, policy, action, and there was a movement and energy that everyone passed to the next person.
Right.
So this idea we talk all the time about, your event should be an entire story arc, content that allows people to follow along and ultimately arrive at the same place together. Mm-hmm. The other thing that they did in the sense of belonging was they used things like call and response. This is something that we will sometimes factor into a speaker or a speech. That created some energy transfer, right? So if someone said something that was a powerful statement, there was a call and response happening that allowed everyone to participate in that power statement, right?
Yep.
And then finally, besides the fact that they use storytelling throughout, like the storytelling narrative is powerful, they also had theme days and they had specific call to action around the attendees in the room to create that connection to each other.
But also people knew how to participate.
Right. There was this it was obvious. It was a clear communication because if you looked at the room, you could see that everyone got the message, right? So on the day that the delegates each made their state announcement, they all dressed to the theme of that state. They all came prepared with a look and a costume and a sense of pride in their state.
Right.
They also had banners or signs that they gave to everyone that indicated or emphasized the messages that they wanted to be able to share that day. Yep. And then finally, to that sense of connection, when they weren't on the floor, or even when they were on the floor, but when they weren't on the floor and they were out doing interviews, they were out in the foyer of the event. If you looked at any of the news coverage from the event, you saw that they all had simple identifiers that identified that a ribbon around their neck that identified they're part of the event, and then details about them, their name, their state, what their constituency was, so that there was an immediate way to be able to connect and see as you're walking through the streets of Chicago, ooh, you're also a part of this event. So that sense of connection is something that I want to bring forward in movement building, and a lesson we can learn. There were moments that you and I have been like reflecting on and looking at these big events and being like, that right there, that's the thing. We need our nonprofits to understand that they too can do this.
So let's do that for a second, because I think a lot of people are like, cool, multi-day national political conference. I'm not that. I don't have that budget. I don't have that star power. Or, yeah, Eras tour. Cool. Don't have, like these are lessons that are happening on a grand scale. But how do we bring them into, let's say, a major donor event?
Yeah. 3 things. Content that is good, story-rich, connective, compelling, relevant content. If you have a program where folks are getting on the stage and speaking for 5 hours and they're all unrelated, that is not going to build a movement.
Right.
It's going to upset your donors and put them to sleep. So your content needs to be a focus area. Connection. As we look at this post-COVID era, the need audience members have to connect to each other, to speakers in the room, to experts, is a driving factor to if they stay engaged or not. So we need to make sure that we have built into our program a focused, seated, very poignant, short, relevant content, and the rest needs to be built around connection so that we're not trying to compete with each other. Don't put them up against each other. We don't need a standing cocktail hour to also lead into speeches on the stage. No one will listen to those speeches because it says this is in competition.
Yep.
And it is easier to stay in conversation with the one person than to stand here and try to tune in a crowded room. But if you seat me in a seat, now this can be theater style, it can be at a dinner table, but if you put me in a seat for a focused content program, the rest of my event can be about connection. But the connection has to be more than just like, we have beer and people can talk. That's great. That is absolutely great. But this is the point where you connect to your donors. So we have had conversations with Susan Howlett. This was a repeat episode we played at the very end of the summer that she identified all the ways your board can play host and connect to your donors and be a conduit for your donors. But if you're stuck behind your desk, if you're stuck at registration, if you're managing the catering crew, if you're serving the meals, you are not connecting to your donors.
Right.
So I urge you to release the many hat wearing and budget constraint mindset and invest in the things that are going to relieve you so that you can be connecting to your donors. That's probably the single biggest reason why you should be holding the event. And if you're missing that opportunity to connect, you are missing the opportunity to build a movement.
Well, and I think what's embedded in that is the idea that you're someone your donors want to know.
Yeah.
I think all too often the idea of WIFM, what's in it for me, gets villainized.
Right.
Or vilified.
Vilified,
thank you. And I think if we remember that donors walk in the door to our event embedded in WIFM.
Yeah.
Bar. People I know.
Is this easy? Is this fun?
Is this easy? Is this fun? But also, who's here that I know from the organization? That's cachet, relationship, belonging, connection, all those pieces that you embedded running around behind the registration table trying to seat somebody who showed up last minute. You yourself doing that takes you out of the mix of continuing to be in relationship with me. Yeah. So I came thinking I was going to be able to talk to the executive director and the development director and introduce them to the table guests at the table I'm hosting.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's my WIFM. I'm like, I put my social standing on the line to invite these people to come to say, here's this organization I love. I invite them to sit at my table. I want to connect them immediately and show that I am connected, right? Like these, and I think sometimes these get put in the demerits column as if like, well, I shouldn't expect that, or that doesn't work, or whatever. And it's like, that's the point.
Right. It is the whole point. Well, okay. As the introvert in the room, I have questions for you about this.
Great.
Because I think that oftentimes in the development sector, the folks who have been most embedded with the event sometimes are also the introverts. They're used to being behind the scene in the logistics. How do we move into a place where for that night, there is an open door to help make those connections, to move past that inclination to go stand behind the registration desk and move into forward-facing conversations with donors?
Sure. So I think the misnomer here is that introverts don't want to talk to people. That's not true.
Right.
I want to have deep, meaningful conversations with a select group of people, not all of East Portland.
Right. Find your people.
I need to find my people because connection and belonging are main priorities for me.
Right.
So going into that situation, if I'm the development director, this night, this moment is part of a continuation of a relationship I'm having with people in an ideal scenario of stewardship. So it's not that I'm talking to a whole room of people I don't know. It's that this is this amazing opportunity for all of these people to also know each other.
Right.
So there's this really great thing that I can have a conversation with you. Ted walks up. I am like, oh, great. Here's Ted. I'm talking to Ted. We touch base. I've kind of checked all of the boxes. I've moved those relationship pieces forward, not in an inauthentic way.
Right.
And then I go, Ted, do you know Sam?
Yeah.
You two should know each other. You have been donors at this organization for such a long time, and I think you have a lot of overlap. I kind of conversation bomb the two of you and get the two of you connected, and then I can extract a little and go do that. I think when we look at the event as a whole, oh my gosh, here's 300 people, that becomes really overwhelming.
Right.
But break it down into points. You should have a strategy going in. The same way you were talking earlier about board members coming in. Board members should have a roster of people they're going and being in conversation with.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a roster that I'm going in conversation with. Same with the ED. And then I don't have to talk to everyone.
Right.
But everyone is being talked to and invited in, more importantly. And that, I think, is the strategic piece that people miss.
Yeah, I agree. So I think the need for connection is a driving factor. I think the need for content that is relevant.
Yep.
And I do want to break that down a little bit after our break because I want to be able to talk a little bit about the intentionality of program design. But then the other fun little bit that we sometimes either totally forget or it's the only thing we focus on is the celebration. Right. It has to have some sense of joy, some sense of fun, some sense of celebration. And that's the other piece that I would take from our two examples so far of the Eras Tour and the DNC is there wasn't a time in those events where I didn't see people singing and dancing and participating because it was fun. Right. There was an element of joy and hope, and all of those create a much deeper sense of connection and belonging and ultimately build a movement. So I think there's three things that we can take from those examples. The big events moving into our small nonprofits and the events we produce, we can bring really good content, valuing connection and thinking about the intentionality of connection, and then celebration. Those three C's: content, connection, celebration.
Love it.
Let's take a short break. And when we come back, let's dive a little bit deeper into the content piece.
Sounds great.
Unleash the power of events to energize your donors and amplify your mission. Join us at the Elevate Conference in 2025, where you'll learn the essential tools for planning a successful fundraising event. Book your tickets now for March 12th and 13th. This dynamic hybrid conference, hosted at Avenue in Portland, Oregon, and streamed live for our virtual audience, will equip you with practical tools, demos, and templates that you can put to work immediately. Don't miss out. Secure your spot today at Elevate 2025. Visit elevatenonprofit.com to register now. Elevate Conference 2025 is brought to you by Swaim Strategies and the AV Department, powered by elevatenonprofit.com.
Welcome back. Sam and I are here today just talking shop.
Cracking the code.
Cracking the code. We've got some big events that have been happening in the world that you and I have just been like, this is it on a really big stage, but it's some really good, consistent bedrock pieces of events, why they matter, what they can do, how you build movements for your mission. You have done a couple of really great thought leadership articles that you've posted on LinkedIn that folks should check out, that you've taken both of these, Taylor Swift and the DNC, and the specific calls, that political calls that you've been on post-convention, and have broken those down for folks. And so we'll put links to those in the show notes so that people can check those out as well.
Great. I think that there's just moments within these that you and I have been like, oh, this is something that is just like a bright, shining spotlight that we should be bringing into our organizational events.
Yeah.
And so we talked about the importance of the 3 C's, but I want to dive just a little bit into content. So content, I think, is an element that we don't often spend enough time on. We think a lot about how are we going to get attendance, who's coming, our sponsors, our look, our theme, our procurement, and sometimes content gets overlooked. And yet content, I think, is probably the most important element. And I want to be able to chat with you about storytelling, but I want to frame for folks the importance, especially out of like neuroscience and connectivity, the importance of content being relevant.
Yep.
Right. So if I'm talking to, let's say, a room full of youth about Medicaid, they may not have any attachment, right? So if our content isn't relevant,
okay, boomer.
Right. If our content isn't relevant to our audience,
Totally.
then there's an immediate checkout and immediate disconnect. There is a lot of intentionality that can go into making sure that you understand your audience. Priya Parker talks about know when to close the door.
Exactly.
Right? So this idea that we're designing for a purpose, and if we really want our event to create a movement, we have to understand who in that room is going to create the movement. There are some times where we're building a bigger table and casting a wider net, right? And like the Eras Tour is an example of that. But there are other times when perhaps we're trying to speak to folks who are really invested in farming culture in our community. Bringing everyone in our community together may be less effective than speaking to the impact we can have with, let's say, for example, a mission of seed savers. The impact we could have in that work by bringing together 20 individuals who are really invested in that mission to have a dinner on the farm and spend time putting their hands in the dirt, right? The content has to be relevant to the audience. At Elevate, our conference happening in March, we are very specific that the content of that event is for your fundraising event.
Yeah.
We're really designing for a particular audience, and we're hoping that the audience, and we're working with the audience to give us feedback and to tell us what is most useful to them. I think we overlook surveys as an opportunity to gather information. It's an engagement tool we can have with our donors. But there was also the mention you had of the virtual experiences that we recently saw, and they're still happening, right? Yep. So it kicked off, I think it was literally the day after it was announced that the Democratic Party was transitioning candidates. The day after Kamala Harris was announced as running for president, a group of Black women gathered on a phone call, a Zoom call, and were able to mobilize call to action, volunteer registration, and fundraising. And the world took note of that, and it was immediately followed by Black men who did a similar call. Then it was followed by white women for Harris. Then it was followed by Out for Harris. Then it was followed for white dudes for Harris. Then it was followed by chefs for Harris and union workers for Harris. And there have been a number of gatherings that have been virtual. I think we're all tired of Zoom calls. We're used to
And in fact, some of these calls actually broke Zoom.
right. But we're used to Zoom calls in the format and structure of a meeting. And I want to argue that it's the meeting that we're tired of, not the gathering.
You bet.
Because I think that as a nonprofit, we frequently...
Because the meeting is actually not a gathering.
Right. A meeting is not a gathering.
In a technical sense.
Yes.
But yes.
But not for the purpose of building our movement. And yet these events were very effective at building a movement because they created a sense of connection and belonging. They had relevant content that was specific. They knew who was in the room, right? Those are specific. Chefs for Harris, you knew you were talking to a room full of chefs and a bunch of foodies that were super excited to be there. But the room was a proverbial room, and it was a digital room that was created in Zoom. I think a lot of our nonprofits there's a lot of stress and trauma that occurred, but we're forced to move into a virtual setting during COVID. And we're so relieved to let go of that for their gatherings. As we start to look up now, as we start to look at what the future of fundraising events are, I think we have to look at how we go back and adopt some of those things that worked. And the organizations that have retained a virtual element, whether it be their event is hybrid and they broadcast their event out to a home audience, or whether it be that they host something specifically for a virtual audience, there is opportunity for movement building. And I want to use the example of an organization we've worked with where they host a donor call once a month. The CEO invites donors to tune in and join the call. And in that call, it is a gathering with specific content. There is an opportunity for connection. Folks drop their name in the chat. They ask questions of the CEO and she answers. And the content specifically is addressing where their dollars are going and their need. And out of that, they're seeing huge results because it keeps people connected to the mission. So I think there was a learning lesson there where I saw, this is a great example of why gathering in a virtual setting is still relevant and something we still need to be thinking of. So
Agreed.
Big examples. I know it's hard to sometimes dissect those, but little pieces I think that we can take out of them around celebration, content, being relevant, around that sense of connection, and globally a bigger understanding of belonging and the value of belonging. And also the biggest tool we have in our toolbox that all of these events do so well is storytelling. So I want to come back and break down and digest with you a little bit about storytelling, but let's take a pause. And then when we come back, we'll dive into the impact of storytelling on our events.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the Fundraising Elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristin for your program and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at elevatenonprofit.com. You can also find the link in the show notes.
All right, Kristin, let's talk storytelling. The biggest tool we have in our toolbox. How do you see stories effectively being used in some of these events?
Yeah, I think purpose of story, purpose of events even, I would say, helps understand how to see the stories being used.
Yeah.
So when I look at storytelling, I see it as a mechanism to close distance.
Yes, I agree.
I think often we lead with, what is this going to convey to people and how does that work? Yeah, that's great. But the purpose for even telling a story is that I would like experience to transfer between us. And so I'm trying to close the distance. So when you think about an event, there's already literally inherent distance between the speaker on a stage and someone in the audience. And story is a way for all of us to be in the space together. I know we're in the same four walls, but that does not mean we are actually in the space together
Right.
metaphorically, and story is a vehicle to do
Yeah.
that. And so at every opportunity at events that I can see to use story to bring us all into the movement together, that's the best use of that content. It creates connection between us.
Right.
So back to your C of being connected, and why people are a part of things is feeling that connection. There are some very nerdy neuroscience pieces to that I'll talk about in a minute. But just on its face, it connects us because stories engage feelings, facts don't.
Right. Yeah.
People give from an emotional place. In the brain, the decision-making part of the brain is not where language lives.
Yeah.
So it when you have that, like, I don't know, I had this like inkling. Yes, maybe it's the magic butterfly sitting on your shoulder telling you what to do, but more importantly, it's that part of your brain that's the decision-making part of your brain that's beyond language, that's been emotionally engaged and not distanced with facts and figures, that's leaning in. And that's when I'm writing checks we can't cash, right? Like, when you have gotten me, I can't be ungotten.
Right.
And there's reasons for that. There's a great study that came out of the University of London where they took a bunch of people. I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's important to think about, where they took a bunch of people and wired them up to be able to monitor respiration, heart rate, all of that. And they put them in a theater and had a live piece of theater happening on stage in front of them. A story. And they found that heartbeats synced.
That's crazy.
And if you and I knew each other coming into the play, they kept everybody hooked up. But if you and I had an actual relationship going in, when we went to intermission, to have a soda water, we stayed synced. Now, if that doesn't say movement building, I don't know what does. And there are clearly bio and neuro reasons for that. And the world is chaos. Without filters, the world is just chaos and noise. We've all had that moment where we're just like, there's too much input.
Yeah.
I cannot hear anything anymore. I can't see anything anymore. I don't know how to take this in. You have this little cute part of your brain called the hippocampus, whose job is to run a filter on that. And the filter that hippocampus is running is narrative.
Absolutely. Keep going.
Well, and so we are literally hardwired to be scanning what's coming at us and looking for a form we can identify, which is a story.
It's funny. You and I have a mutual friend that I'm like, oh, she is the hippocampus of our group. Because when we are in social environments, especially like public settings, she will look across a room and tell us the story of what's happening on the other side of the room, right? Oh, that guy's traveling for business. Or, oh, I wonder if they're on a date. So she's constantly creating narrative about what's happening around us. And I do think it's important for us to understand that if we create an event where all of our speakers are getting up with their own content, their own agenda, their own stories, and they're not interconnected and it's not mission-centric, we very easily have too much noise that is too hard to filter.
Well, and I think you nail exactly the challenge in front of people. I think organizations go, we told a story.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
You were speaking earlier about your whole program being a continuous arc formed of individual moments of story, but there's a bigger story. So it's like you have to have your eye on the micro and the macro at the same time and how they're building to one another. I mean, we've all had that dastardly experience of reading a really good book that takes an abrupt left turn.
Right.
And you're like, I'm out.
Yeah. Throw the book across the room. What am I here for?
I'm out because something happened that is so counter to the narrative structure that I either have to spend time to go be like, why did that happen? Was that really cool? Did I understand it? Or I just don't want to expend my energy there. And so when you do that on stage at your event, let's say you have like all of these emotionally compelling, really good, build one on top of the other. You're bringing people through the gauntlet, right? And then all of a sudden, before the fundraising, your keynote gets up, which is not where your keynote should be, and they start talking about another organization, which they should not be doing. We take this abrupt left turn. You never get me back in the same way because you've confused me and I only had so much energy. So there's a reason why utilizing universal structures is helpful to you because I'm spending less energy as your viewer, as your listener, to move through the story with you.
That's interesting, to consideration is how much energy your audience has to spend.
Yes.
Because I've been in the rooms where I'm in the same physical space, but I'm being lectured with a dissertation that I do not understand.
Right.
And I'm like, why am I here? Mostly because it's a lot of work for me, right? And it makes me feel maybe stupid or less than. And so if I have to do that much work to connect the dots, I leave there frustrated.
Well, and the other piece that's happening there is stories engage emotions, facts don't.
Yeah.
When I'm emotionally engaged, oh boy, 2 chemicals happen in my brain. Oxytocin and dopamine.
Yeah.
Right? And without that emotional engagement, we don't get the graft of those emotions. And that oxytocin is a bonding hormone. That's how I start to feel a part of something. That's your movement building. It creates connection.
Yeah.
And the dopamine helps us remember the stories as packages of information. And it is a feel-good hormone. So it's doing this dual duty where in the moment I'm like, heck yeah. It's also imprinting the story in a way that I could take with me outside of the room, continue the movement building outside of the room. Stories are these lovely packaged effects of your work that I can go out and share. If you ask me to do your mission, values, I mean, how many versions of that do we have on our website?
List of programs.
Programs. Like if you want me to go out and proselytize that for you, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
I just won't. But if I can see your why as an impact story, which is why the special appeal story, folks, is the pot of gold, as you like to call it, at the end of the rainbow, that special appeal, is when you show one specific emotionally engaging story of impact, I emotionally connect. If you have that person up on the stage speaking and I'm moved, we move into a similar emotional space.
Yeah.
That transfer is happening. We start to mirror each other and then you've got me, right?
So let's keep people then. If we've got them, I'm hearing or I'm imagining listeners say, we don't tell our clients stories.
Sure.
That is not our approach. How do we do it ethically?
Yep. Ethical storytelling is a really big area of conversation right now. And I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah.
I think it is the core of what we should be doing as empowerment organizations. And I don't know a nonprofit out there that isn't on some level either a primary purpose or a effect of their work is empowerment for the people that they're working with. The biggest way I've seen to make your storytelling ethical is to center your storyteller in the story. I think all too often, this is the conversation that happens between development and program staff. Development staff. This year, we need a story about putting roofs on houses. Program staff. Well, we have several people who've had roofs on houses. Development staff. We really want to make people cry at the idea that they could put a roof on a house for someone. Do you have somebody who also has this, and this going on that would be really great to sort of really amp up the volume of the story that roof was really important to
So
them
program staff who's responsible for making sure people stay housed now have to pause that work to go find this fictional unicorn of a story.
Fictional unicorn of a story, but also a story we've already written.
Right.
That isn't true for whoever we're going to invite in to tell it. And that's the biggest mistake, is that we dream up what the perfect story to tell that message is going to be without actually allowing the storyteller to tell us what their message is.
Yeah.
And I think that level of disempowerment for people is catastrophic for your work. It's disingenuous to their story, and it completely disempowers them and allows you to use them.
Yeah.
And that power dynamic, I think we don't talk about power dynamics enough when we talk about storytelling. You have power in that scenario always. And the goal is for you to transfer that power, or as much of it as possible, to the storyteller.
Yeah.
They should not feel like they are obligated to tell their story because they received services. That is a misuse of your power. They shouldn't feel like they are obligated to tell it in a certain way. They should be able to name their experience in their story. And because you put the roof on that house for them, doesn't mean that all these other things happened for them as a result. They get to name what that felt like, what that did for them, what that looked like for them. And so I think centering the storyteller to name their truth is critical. I think consent at every step of the way is the other way you remain ethical in your storytelling. You have to tell them what this is going to be used for before they can actually say yes. Don't have them say yes and then tell them afterwards, oh, and. Every one of those oh, ands is a new yes.
Yeah.
That is not a blanket yes.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge that I've seen sometimes is someone bravely comes and tells their story, and they don't understand that by having it in a video capture at the event, it's now going to be on YouTube.
You bet.
And I think that has to be a second yes before it's shared. If it's being mailed out.
Maybe even a third.
Yeah,
right?
if it's being mailed out,
Yep.
they have to say yes. If it's being published anywhere, they have to say yes. If it's being shared on social media, they have to say yes.
And I think they get to not only continue to say yes, but they get to revoke.
They get to say no.
But not only no, but revoke.
Yeah.
So I told that story at a time in my life when it was important for me to tell that story.
Right.
I'm not in that place anymore. I don't want that to be my story. So I know I gave you permission to use it over here on your website. I'd actually like you to take it down. That's not my story anymore. And actually, I would argue that is the best and truest fruition of your work.
Yeah.
Is we see people in a slice of time. They continue after that slice of time.
Yeah.
In whatever direction they continue in. It is not our job to keep them frozen.
Yeah.
And so it's continued consent, continued enthusiastic consent, not just under duress or feeling. They need to feel proud of what the story that they're telling. And if they don't feel proud and their family and friends don't feel proud about the story that they're telling, no. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we've seen is sharing that story with them before its use.
Right.
So that they can, again,
approve,
enthusiastically consent. I know I said you could use it, but this story is not representative. So we either need to change these things or you no longer have my yes.
Yeah.
And I think those are some really key pieces. What I want to say to the organizations who are like, we can't tell client stories, we don't tell client stories, I would encourage you to think about what would, and likely that's coming from a good place.
Right,
because,
absolutely.
Because you saw a story done really, really wrong, where somebody actually got used, their story got manipulated, and they have trauma around that experience. We are not there to continue to traumatize people.
Right.
In many ways, people are able to name, this is a part of my journey, and I want to actually own and author my story. And there's such a great place of strength in that.
Yeah.
But there are also other ways. Maybe it's not on the stage at your major donor event. Maybe they become a part of your speakers bureau so that they're out on much smaller level connecting one-to-one and can constantly control their narrative by how they're engaging and telling it and what that looks like. I think the want for folks who go through our programs to give back is real. And I think we continue to disempower some of their journey if we don't provide them opportunity. But I think we have to be really careful not to tell people's stories for them. And my guess is that's where some of the hesitation of like, also, yes, there are confidentiality agreements, all of those sorts of things in the kind of work you do. And there are ways to tell stories that don't have to name their full name. address, occupation,
Yeah.
right? Like there are ways to get creative around how stories get told and the mechanisms they get told with to be able to do those pieces. Also, your storyteller does not have to be the only person participating in the story.
Yeah.
So I think about this, especially around youth. You can have additional storytellers.
A teacher.
A teacher. I'm talking specifically about a special appeal story where we hone in on a specific story of impact. You can have other voices adding to that story to help tell the bigger narrative as well. So I think it's about thinking about what that is, but I think you're missing an opportunity to emotionally connect with people if you can't ever tell a story about your work. It starts as a donor for me to have a little bit of mistrust or distrust about, but what does that look like? What does my impact look like? And you can show me charts in your end of year report all day long. That's not the same as me going, oh, I didn't know that putting a roof on that house could do that.
So I feel like this is a topic that has a lot of experts in the space that are starting to really peel back how to do this well. And if Kristin has just scratched the surface for our listeners out there today.
The surface of the surface, yes.
Yes, we need to be thinking about this in our work. I want to give people a bunch of resources because you've done a lot of thought leadership in this space about this. In fact, in our book, Planning a Successful Major Donor Event, you actually have a whole case study and breakdown for folks to utilize about how to do this well on ethical storytelling. You also have this really clear breakdown of how your narrative of an event becomes an entire, like how every element of your event becomes an entire narrative. Yeah. So I want to make sure that folks know that there's a resource there. Our last episode actually interviewed Daria Ford on this topic as a fundraiser, how she applies these things. You've had a past conversation with Jenna Watanabe, the creative director at the Fundraising Event Co., about ethical storytelling and how to really dive into these things for your organization. And if you're looking for additional resources, I feel like the fundraising or the Story Animal is a book.
The Storytelling Animal.
The Storytelling Animal is a book that you frequently refer to and pull forward for folks when they're diving into storytelling. Is there anything else you would recommend for folks who really want to bring this to their organization and say, look, we need to do this better?
I'm going to put some links in the show notes. There's actually some specific resources out there on storytelling, specific language. And I mean that not just in, we use this word when we say that, not this. I mean it, you as organizations need to change the language you use within your organizations to see the people within your programs. Like sometimes I think the notion of ethical storytelling points to people's organizations and their history of how they see have-nots and what that is. So it's actually pointing at a bigger embedded issue within the culture of organizations around what language and the power it has and what that can do. So I have some resources I'll post links to about the power of language specifically and what that is. There's an actual ethical storytelling conference that happens. It happened several weeks ago, but I can post a link to that so you can keep an eye out for that coming up. There's a lot of people really seeing this as an opportunity to right-size some of our organizations and the work we do, and then the storytelling just becomes an outcropping of that. And we actually have an episode coming up with Frank Velasquez Jr. all about language and the power of language and language choice.
And he's one of the speakers that will be on stage with us at the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. So if folks are looking for a way to really dive into this, the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference is the place to be. So we need to wrap up. So we've talked a lot about this being the opportunity to sort of crack the code of your event by looking at some big examples. We've really dialed into connection, community, celebration, and that important tool that we have in storytelling. So let's step into the fundraising elevator. For folks who felt like, wow, this is a lot of information to think about my event, what is the one tip you would give to our fundraising friends?
What you do is enough. stay in your lane and tell that story. I think sometimes we want it to be different, and tell your story well. That's what I want to hear.
I love it. My recommendation for folks, or my one takeaway to be all headed up together, is really think about the audience that you have and how are you designing something that you feel like represents you and your organization. I think that folks often are looking at, well, our donors want this, or we blame our donors. Like, our donors don't want that. Survey them, ask them, talk to donors, and then design the thing that you feel like is true to you and is the party and the event and the story you want to be a part of.
Yep. We're going to close today's episode with a couple calls to action and a couple of announcements.
Excellent.
Our calls to action are that we are less than a month to the election.
Yes.
Please be brave.
Yeah.
Share your stories with friends and neighbors. That's where the impact is. It's not in facts and figures.
Yeah.
It's about emotionally connecting and sharing your experience with other people. And please, please, please make a plan to vote.
Yes.
Know how, know where, know with whom, what the process is. Make sure that you have all your T's crossed and get out there and do it. If you want a step-by-step guide for how storytelling, connection, and belonging show up at your event, check out our book, Planning a Successful Major Donor Event, at elevatenonprofit.com. And make sure to sign up for the Elevate Conference and send your fundraising event to school. This is a 2-day hybrid conference, March 12th and 13th of 2025. It'll be held at Avenue, in Portland, Oregon, or online, wherever you are. Early bird discounted tickets are still available for both virtual and in-person registrations through November 8th.
Yes.
So make sure to get your tickets at elevatenonprofit.com. Links for all of this will be in the show notes. And we super hope you will join us next week, because we have an amazing, insightful conversation with video storyteller Devin Boss about organizing via storytelling and video. We lightly started to touch on video today. Conversation with Devin just blows the doors off. So please join us.
Thanks, everyone.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Friends, before we leave you, we want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, please share it with a friend and leave a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you all for being a part of Elevate. Fundraising at events has been climbing and climbing and climbing, and we're seeing full rooms again, very exciting, and we're seeing money happen again.
We are stronger together, and Elevate is a powerful way for us to join forces for good.
When we co-founded Elevate, it was critical for us to take what we know and we get to experience in events and share it.
What's the next level of stewardship that we need to bring to our supporters, to our volunteers, even to our staff, to our colleagues, right? Because stewardship ultimately is caring for people.
For our team here at Avenue and the AV department, being a part of the Elevate conference is a cornerstone of our year in bringing together so many friends from our network in one space to learn from each other and to collaborate and bring what each individual group has learned to the table to keep all of our friends in the nonprofit sector as up to speed as possible on trends and best practices in the industry.
Little old streaming company in Portland has definitely branched out over the 3 years, and now we're still here in our own venue, which is great.
There's a great energy in this room, and it's not just in this room, it's all the folks that are joining us online. The speakers so far have been unbelievable. I could probably sit and listen to Sam Swaim and Kristin Steele talk for hours, because everything that comes out of their mouths is just perfect nuggets for what we're all trying to achieve with our fundraising events.
I feel like every session so far has been so educational, so on topic, and really engaging and fun to be a part of.
There were best practices that were solid gold some years ago, but they're changing now, and especially around event fundraising.
During lunch today, my organization was featured, and we don't get the limelight too often, so I'm just really humbled to just, be in a great community of nonprofit workers. Gathering is a very important aspect of achieving community prosperity.
We at Kitchen Killer are super excited to bring in new, fresh food, great food, a food that's exciting for people to eat. When people eat more, they drink more. When they drink more, they spend more, and these organizations raise more money.
This was my first time coming, and I'm really glad I did. People seem really engaged. There's a lot of hooting and hollering and applause.
If you're in the industry and you're not here, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think it's important that you come, and you come every year, not only to connect and to gather, but again, to learn new things and to learn best practices. I firmly believe that this is the place to be for every single event planner, fundraising professional, those folks in the industry.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life. Event planners are discovering Avenue, the Pacific Northwest's new AV-forward event venue, intentionally designed with nonprofit fundraising events in mind. From the 93-foot video production wall to the highest quality sound and lighting, premier AV features are included in every venue rental. You'll find the space and audiovisual enhancements to create your unique and memorable event. Visit avenueportland.com to schedule your personal tour.